The role of the railways in opening up the most rural and remote areas of the world cannot be underestimated. In Tasmania, the far northwest, Fingal Valley, Tiana Valley, and West Coast districts were opened up to the world through the iron roads. Little known tale through Tasmanian history is the role of the tramway functioning as a railway. This is the story of Tasmania's longest steel tramway, its rise and its eventual demise. This tramway ran through the steep and scenic hills of the far northwest coast, traversing the terrain between Smithton and the twin towns of East and West Marrawah. Hi, I'm Tasmanian, and this is Rails to Redpa, a history of the Marrawah Tramway. In 1884, a man named Joseph Lee moved to the Smithton district and established a sawmill at a new settlement known as Leesville, about 2 miles from Smithton. In 1885, Lee opened a 2-mile tramway from his sawmill through to the wharves on the Duck River in Smithton. He continued to extend the tramway westward towards Broadmeadows, while he built a branch to Pelican Point. Pelican Point Tramway opened in 1901 and was contracted to the Tasmanian Government Railways, who ran it from Tramyard Station on the north bank of the Duck River through to Lees Junction, where the line to Leesville branched off, then ending at the deep water port of Pelican Point. In November 1938, the TGR refused to allow trains on the pier. In 1941, a huge fire burnt the pier down. Returning to Lees Tramway, a 3'6" locomotive known as Coffee Pot was the first known running the line. By 1890, the tram had reached 8 miles long and stretched from the Duck River through to the Christmas Hills, along with a branch heading southward 10 miles to Trawata. By 1902, a large station and yard were constructed at Tramyard on the north bank of the Duck River in Smithton. In 1908, after considerable farming development around the Mowbray Swamp, sparked the construction of a 2-mile extension from the Trawata branch to open up more farmland. In 1906, the Marrawah Tramway Company was founded by local farmers of the Marrawah communities, who advocated for a tramway linking Smithton with both Marrawahs. The leader of this fight was local farmer Archibald Ford. For years, Ford had been battling to get produce to the markets in usable condition and partnered with Lee to establish the link. At the end of 1906, legislation was passed to enable the construction of a tramway from Comback Road in West Marrawah to Pelican Point or Smithton. The Act did not specify whether it had to be locomotive or horse-hauled. A deal was struck between the MTC and Lee, where Lee handed over 9 miles of tramway from Pelican Point Junction to the Christmas Hills in return for access to 5,000 acres of timber along the tramway in government grants. Work on clearing the alignment started on the 14th of January 1907, while the Lee brothers started work on extending the Christmas Hills Tramway 3 miles as per the agreement. The full length of the proposed tramway was 22 miles from Comeback Road and Pelican Point Junction. In July 1908, construction had progressed sufficiently as 8 miles of track had been laid and the entire formation had been cleared. The Lee brothers were not rewarded with money for their tramway, rather they received large shares in the MTC. Delays in construction began to appear and only 17 miles of track were completed as of 1911. In February 1913, the tramway was completed, with the iron rails laid from a temporary station at East Marrawah near Redpa through to Tramyard, and wooden rails on the last 7 miles from East Marrawah to Comeback Road. The tram was 25 miles long from Pelican Point Junction and 26 miles from Smithton Tramyard Station, as it was now called. In 1913, an interested visitor named Joseph Lyons visited the area and rode the Marrawah Tramway. Lyons noted the size and density of the forest was unrivaled in Tasmania. Junctions for horse-drawn tramways were noted at several points along the line until transferring onto a horse-drawn tramway to complete a short trip through the terminus of West Marrawah. Joseph Lyons went on to become Tasmanian Premier and later Australian Prime Minister during the Great Depression. However, while Lyons made his trip down the Marrawah Tramway, behind the scenes the Marrawah Tramway Company was struggling. They had accomplished their goal but could not afford to upgrade the last section of rails into West Marrawah. The Tasmanian government entered the fray shortly after Lyon's visit, paid £21,500 to acquire the tramway, rolling stock, and all associated infrastructure. Formal transfer occurred on the 2nd of May 1914, with the Public Works Department now responsible for the operation of the railway. A deviation was constructed to bypass the Leesville sawmill, with sidings still running into it. A parliamentary report was submitted in October 1915, which detailed that between £12,000 and £15,000 were required to upgrade the Redpa to Comback Road section steel rails. 3 locomotives were known to have run the tramway during the 1910s, those being a Hudswell-Clark locomotive known as Six-Wheeler, an old Baldwin known as Fantail, which had an overhaul at the Launceston workshops, and a newer Baldwin named Big Ben, as it was much heavier than the other 2. A Bayer Peacock locomotive, later classified C-28, was also known to run short shunting duties on the line. In 1917, upgrades to the line between the 2 Marrawahs started, however this stagnated and was not completed until May 1925. In 1920, work was underway for a new bridge over the Duck River to finally link the Smithton town centre to the Marrawah network. As part of the Smithton Branch Line project, a branch from the Stanley to Tarawata line was constructed from Irishtown Junction to Smithton Tramyard. Thereafter, most trains from Marrawah terminated at the Smithton Nelson Street station in the town centre. On the 11th of July 1922, a rail link was opened from Mayalla to Wiltshire Junction as an extension of the Western Line, linking to the Stanley to Tarawata line. This finally killed the isolation of the Circular Head district, with fast and reliable rail travel through to Burnie, Launceston and Hobart. By 1925, the steel rail tram had been extended to Comeback Road, however it ran on a different alignment due to easier grades. On the 26th of May 1925, celebrations were held in Smithton to celebrate the opening of the direct link to West Marrawah. A new station at East Marrawah was opened, much closer to the centre of this community. A tramway was opened from Salmon River Junction near East Marrawah to the Welcome Swamp in 1924 to open up timber deposits. Different coupling systems were developed by the Marrawah Tramway and the rest of the TGR, so early on several transition wagons were built to assist with transshipping. In 1923, the TGR started a rail motor service between Tramyard and Stanley using the former Emu Bay Railway Argyle railcar. There was a daily passenger train to Marrawah during this period, as well as frequent trains to Pelican Point and the Tugari Mill. In 1929, the Tasmanian Government Railways officially acquired the line from the Public Works Department. During the 1930s and 40s, a thrice-weekly rail motor service ran from Smithton Nelson Street to West Marrawah, which became known as Marrawah. All trains terminated at East Marrawah, now known as Redpa, after the 2nd of November 1939, when work on dismantling the line beyond began. In the 1950s, the TGR tried to upgrade the line's status by renaming it the Marrawah Branch, but this was taken with a grain of salt and it was still known as a tramway by most locals and railway employees up until its closure, despite it hadn't taken a tram since about 1920. B, C and CC class locomotives were the mainstay on the line for most of its later lifespan. Wooden-bodied DP class rail motors provide passenger service during the later years. Sadly, the modern era began to catch up with the tramway. In the 1950s, almost all freight in the area had moved to road traffic. On the 30th of March 1961, the tramway between Redpa and Leesville closed, with only a short section maintained for the purposes of sawmill traffic. The sawmill at Leesville permanently closed in 1972. The line between Tramyard and Leesville was closed. In 1974, another closure occurred when it was curtailed across the Duck River to a new yard named Tramyard in honour of the old one on the other side of the river. This yard was located at the General Jones vegetable processing factory. Sadly, the line from Stanley to Smithton, including the short remains of the Marrawah Tramway, finally closed in 1990, bringing an end to the railways in the far northwest of Tasmania. This brings me to the end of this video. If you enjoyed watching, please consider subscribing for more content related to rail history in Tasmania. Watch this video on the history of the Emu Bay Railway and like this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time on Tasmanian.